welcome to another edition of the Westfield Council on Aging Presents. This is a special collaborative effort between Tina Gorman, Executive Director of the Westfield Senior Center and the Westfield Council on Aging, and Pete Coles, who is the producer and Chief Engineer for WCPC Cable Channel 15. Our topic today is avoiding scams and ways seniors can feel safe. And our guest, who I'm very excited to have in today, is Attorny Gulluni, who is the Hampden District Attorney for this area. His office is in Springfield. So, Anthony, we are excited beyond belief to have you in the studio today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to make your way over here to Westfield and be able to talk about this message of importance to our seniors. But before we do, I always like to give our viewers a sense of who the guest is and have them get a chance to get to know the person a little bit. So just give us a brief recap of where you grew up, where you went to college, and kind of how did you become a DA?
Well, I'm first delighted to be here, Harry, and thank you for hosting and having me. And it's great to be in the city of Westfield always. So, I grew up in the city of Springfield, and I'm a proud resident of the city still. I grew up in Forest Park, and now I'm in East Forest Park. So I made a big move, one digit, my zip code, 7 years ago when I bought my current house. But I grew up with a great example in my father and my parents, of course. But my father was in public service his whole life and really sought to help people. His currency was helping people. It wasn't, accolades or money or anything like that. So, I decided I wanted to be a lawyer, and my older sister, 11 years older, became a lawyer when I was a kid. So I saw that example in her as well, and I wanted to kind of follow in her footsteps. And she was in corporate law. I realized I probably wasn't as smart as her at some point on the journey. I wanted to do civil law, but I ended up in the Hampden District Attorney's office as an assistant district attorney early on in my career as a lawyer under District Attorney William Bennett, who of course served the county admirably for 20 years. And I fell in love with the work, Harry. I fell in love with working on behalf of the public, working with and for victims of crime. And I fell in love with trying cases and being in court and being before judges and so on and so forth. And, time went on, and I ended up about 7 years in the Hampden District Attorney's office, and I moved through the office and did all kinds of different work and handled very serious cases in the Superior Court. And then my boss at the time all of a sudden was lined up to become a judge appointed by President Barack Obama. And sure enough, he is a judge now. And that presented an opportunity for me to run for office. Of course, the district attorney's offices across the Commonwealth and ours here are elected positions. So I ran at the ripe age of 33, first foray into politics. And, I took a shot on myself, and I had some people around me who believed in me. And I really worked very hard, of course, in that process and defied a lot of people's expectations around the election and around what I could do, what I could achieve at that young age. And had support across the county and earned a lot of endorsements, including the aforementioned District Attorney William Bennett, who, of course, I worked for, as I mentioned, which was a great honor, and other folks in law enforcement organizations, and won office at the end of 2014 and took office in January of 2015. So now as we sit here, I've been in office over 7 years, close to my third term, I hope, and continuing to work on behalf of the public and doing what I really love. And having a great staff around me makes the job a lot more enjoyable, sometimes easier, but it's challenging. And what we've really tried to do, Harry, is do the traditional work of public safety and law enforcement in our courtrooms and be strong, making sure folks are safe, working on behalf of victims, making sure our communities and neighborhoods are safe here in Westfield and across Hampden County. But what we've done a lot of in my 7 years is prevention work. Really saying, hey, how can we engage with communities and people around issues that are causing problems, around criminal issues, around issues like addiction, issues like social media use for kids, issues like bullying for kids, and issues like abuse and scamming, financial abuse and scams and so forth for our elderly population, right, which is so near and dear to us, of course.
Right.
My parents, thank God, are still around, 83 and 78, and, they're my world, and we do everything we can to protect them, and we want to protect all senior citizens. So we're really now engaging across the county on the issues of how seniors can prevent abuse and being scammed and so forth. So it's really sort of consistent with the approach we've taken to public safety. Prevention. Let's get ahead of issues before they happen. Very often, that's the best way to deal with these things.
Yeah. Well, we're excited to have you. You know, it's an important topic, and unfortunately, seniors are a pretty big target, I think, for the scammers, and it's unfortunate because they're so vulnerable. You know, I was thinking about this interview last night, and my mom lived to about 92. I think she passed away a few years ago. And when I think of someone who was vulnerable to scammers, I'm thinking, oh gosh, Mom certainly was, you know, because she was, you know, I started thinking about it. I said, what was it about my mother that made her so vulnerable? And, you know, I got thinking about the fact that she was very trusting, easily influenced, could be confused at times, easily intimidated, could be threatened, and she always needed help. So that opened the door to anybody that was, whether rightfully so or wrongfully so, trying to enter her life. Would you agree with those descriptors as to what makes a senior so vulnerable?
Absolutely, Harry. I mean, our elderly population is strong, right? I mean, you know, our elderly are getting healthier and healthier and living longer and longer and realizing the benefits of exercise and good health. And, you know, I look at my parents. My dad walks every day. My mom takes the dog out.
That's
you know, they
great.
try to eat well. And that's reflected in their health and their longevity. So, you know, we believe our seniors are strong.
Right.
But there are hallmarks of that aging population, many of which you just mentioned about your lovely mom, I'm sure. And I see that in my parents as well, you know, knowing my dad 20 years ago and knowing him now, he's a
Right.
different person.
Right.
And that is commonly the case with senior citizens. So that's a part of why we do this work. And it's a part, sadly, and I think in a frustrating way, why this is so prolific, right? Why these crimes are happening so much, because the bad people, right, the criminals, understand that vulnerable population of senior citizens is one with which they can have their success, meaning they can fool them and get money and scam them in ways that are incredibly widespread. I believe the number is in 2021, as far as, you know, law enforcement was able to tabulate. I think this information might come from the AARP or a similar organization. It's about $3 billion in 2021 was stolen effectively, was taken by fraud from senior citizens in this country. $3 billion. So I think one of the things, Harry, that we want the senior citizen population here in Westfield and across the county to know is that this happens a lot more than you think. So your awareness of it is critical, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the second piece of that we want senior citizens to understand is, if it happens to you, which it might, report it. Don't be embarrassed about it. Don't feel shame, okay? Because it happens to so many people. And these people, sadly, again, they're sophisticated. The criminals, the bad guys, they have learned ways in which they can fool people. They have learned ways to sound legitimate. So when, and I hope it doesn't happen, but if it does, if there is something that happens and you give money to who you realize is not legitimate at some point, or you're contacted and you realize it before something bad happens, report it. Because that reporting is important, not only for law enforcement, but it's important for other senior citizens. So if hopefully we can nip these kinds of things in the bud. There are scams that are local, there are scams that are not local. But the more we know in law enforcement, and the more your friends and your peers and senior centers know about it, the better off and more likely we're going to be able to stop it.
So when you mention report it, should they be going to their local police? Should they be going to your office? Where should they go?
We have a contact number in our office, but we advise folks, let's say here in Westfield, there is a non-emergency number for the Westfield Police Department. So if you get a call, and at some point you realize, hey, this isn't legitimate. Someone is calling me and saying, my grandson is in New York State, and he's in jail, and you better send me $5,000 or he's going to be incarcerated for 2 years. Mm-hmm. But you just saw your grandson 2 hours ago at your son's house, and you know he's here in Westfield and he's safe. Hang up the phone and place that call to the Westfield Police non-emergency number.
Okay.
I know everybody at the Westfield Police Department. It's a great police department committed to serving this community. They want to know about these things, and they want to track those things down. But at the very least, they're sort of accumulating this information, and if they're hearing about these scams, the Westfield Police Department on their social media pages or however they do so will inform other senior citizens. This scam is becoming common in the city of Westfield. Be aware of it. Mm-hmm. So the reporting piece, the communication is indeed important.
You know, these scammers, it's amazing how sophisticated they're getting now. The phone calls that they come in with sound so professional, and even the letters, you know, the mailings that you get, letterheads. You know, I'm in emails as well, so I kind of focus on are there misspellings? Do they mess up the capitalizations? Mm-hmm. Are there margins messed? You know, you're looking for little things to say, is this for real or is this a scam? But they are getting incredibly sophisticated to the point where it looks like the real thing. You think you're getting something from the IRS. You think you're getting something from Westfield Bank. How do you differentiate from those?
Well, it's like any industry, right? I just mentioned in 2021 alone, about $3 billion was taken from senior citizens alone, not the entire population. That number is much higher. So where there's that kind of money, you're going to see that sophistication, that refinement that gets trickier and trickier. And there's 4 really modalities for, you know, these kinds of scams that I want folks to be aware of. You know, 1 is obviously over the phone. 2 is emails, right? Electronic contact, typically by way of an email. 3 is in the mail, which is the least common because there are some safeguards that are put forward by our U.S. Postal Service. And 4 is in person. And I don't want to forget that, Harry, because that, I think, to me, can often be the most dangerous and scary, where folks are coming to someone's house.
Right.
And, you know, they may know that a senior citizen lives there. They may make observations. But they're knocking on doors. And one of the more common scams, especially now as the weather gets nice outside, is you'll have someone approach your house and say, hey, I just paved a neighbor's house over a couple streets over, and I got some extra asphalt. Want me to do your driveway? I'll do it for $500. And you say, oh, maybe, okay. This person, you know, looks sort of like a blue-collar guy and, you know, plays the part. And, okay, give me the check, and I'm going to go to Home Depot, and I'll be right back. You never see him again. And really the fundamental point, whatever the scam is, and I just said this at the Wilbraham Senior Center last week, our senior citizens' safety is number 1, right? So don't open the door if you don't know who it is. You have no obligation to open your door. You can talk with somebody through the door. If someone says, hey, I'm from Eversource, power company, whatever it is here in Westfield Gas and Electric.
Right.
Call you can say to that person, right? Sir, I'm going to call Westfield Gas and Electric just to make sure. And if that person's gone the next time you look, you know exactly what happened. That person was not legitimate.
Great point.
I had a situation with my spouse who opened the door and had a conversation with someone, which she told me about later. I wasn't home. And the guy was purporting to be a carpet cleaner. And he had a card that she told me about later, that had some numbers on it. And she got within arm's distance from this individual. Had no idea who he was, right? And I said, Leslie, what are you doing? You open the door, and she's about 120 pounds to some man you don't know, purporting to be a carpet cleaner, and had a conversation with him. So what I tell our senior citizens, when I tell my parents, at the very least, if you're compelled to open the door, make sure there's a screen door in between you and that person. There's something there, right? My parents have a screen door, I believe on both doors, their side and front doors. In their side door, they added a little slide lock as well to that screen door, and they keep it locked. So if they open the door, there's something that's protecting them, and I would tell all our senior citizens that. But don't be compelled to necessarily open the door if someone is there unexpectedly. And if they say, hey, I'm from, you know, whatever company, verify that. Verify that. And what we say more broadly, Harry, is don't act alone and don't act in haste. Okay, that's kind of our trademark. The thing we want people to remember, that mantra: don't act alone, don't act in haste. And what I mean by that is when you get an email that's suspicious, asking for money or purporting to, inform you about something that's happened to a grandchild or nephew or whatever it might be, or you get that phone call where someone on the other end of the line says, I'm from the IRS and you're delinquent and the police are
Right.
coming to get you in 3 hours if you don't wire me $4,000, whatever it might be. Don't act alone. Don't act in haste.
That's a great mantra.
Meaning, whether you're fortunate enough to still have your spouse around, or you've got a son or daughter who you can call, or a friend from the senior center, right? Don't act alone. Step away from that situation and get someone else's opinion. Is this legitimate? Call your Westfield Police Department non-emergency number. Go to someone else and don't act alone. And the next piece is don't act in haste, which kind of comes part and parcel with don't act alone, right? Don't act in haste, meaning these scammers, these bad guys who, again, have become very sophisticated and good at what they do, try to get people emotional, right? They prey on those emotions. They prey on your fear. They prey on your sadness. They prey on your joy, right? They say, hey, you just won the lottery, but you've got to provide me with money and information
Right.
before you can get your $100,000. They prey on those different emotions. They prey on your sadness. There's a natural disaster. In the last several years, we've had many, unfortunately. I'm calling to fundraise for the hurricane in Florida. Double check these things, right? And they prey on your sadness, your fear. When often the grandparent scheme, right? As I mentioned before, hey, and they may know your grandchild's name.
Yeah.
They may say your granddaughter Katie is in New York and she just had a very bad car accident and you need to wire me $5,000 immediately so I can get her care at a hospital. I mean, all these different things that are so devious in that they're really pulling at your heartstrings and those emotions. Don't act alone and don't act in haste. Step away and say, I'm going to call my son, who's Katie's father, and find out where Katie is. These things that are precautions, that are preventative measures you can take to make sure that you're not being scammed. Don't act alone and don't act in haste. One of the other general things we give to senior citizens is you don't know who's calling you, but you know who you call. And what I mean by that is you get a phone call and someone, again, purports to be from the IRS or the Social Security Administration, right, in Washington, D.C. Your Social Security benefits are going to be cut off because we don't have your Social Security number and we don't have your personal identifying number or whatever they might want to get from you. Say, well, give me your number. I'm going to call the IRS. Step away from that call somehow because you don't know who called you. And the other piece, and you referenced how sophisticated, these scammers have become and how refined and official what they send you, whether it's via email or in the mail, might look. One piece of their sophistication is that sometimes your caller ID might come up and say something that seems legitimate to you, or might be a 413 local area code, where in fact this person is in Texas or they're in another country.
Right.
There are ways where they can have the information that you see in your caller ID be illegitimate and to you look like this is someone local or this is a particular company or organization. So don't trust necessarily your caller ID information. Always step away from those phone calls. Don't let yourself get wrapped up in the emotion and double check. Don't act alone and don't act in haste.
Those are all great tips. I think about the fact that, they come in pretty regularly. Like I'll get an email saying, you have just made a purchase of X amount of dollars. Click here if there's a problem with that or whatever. And I'm figuring, okay, I don't think I ever did business with that company. I'm not clicking on anything because I'm thinking that somehow they're getting access to me, or now they want to find out my bank information or credit card information or anything like that. But again, to your point, they play on your emotions. I've heard these stories of people getting calls saying your granddaughter's in trouble or your son was in a car accident and you need to send money. Unfortunately, I have friends that have fallen for those, and they have sent money, and then there's no way to trace it.
Yeah, that's one of the fundamental pieces that you touch on, Harry, is we're really, so committed to this prevention work, really because we want to help senior citizens avoid financial abuse. And we know that our senior citizens very often have worked their entire lives to retire, to be comfortable. Some are living on limited incomes.
Right.
Their money is so precious, right? So we don't want them to lose a dime illegitimately. But the other piece that you touch on is it's very hard, frankly, for law enforcement to track down offenders, to make arrests, and to prosecute these cases. And even when we do prosecute, it's still an uphill battle to get folks' money back. We may be able to, find justice and punish somebody for something heinous like stealing money from a senior citizen, but even getting that senior citizen's money back, especially in a timely fashion, is a very difficult process because of the court system and so on and so forth. So we really see, that ounce of prevention being much better than a pound of cure, right? We want to stop it before it starts so you never lose the money, and then having to deal with that investigation, which sometimes we're successful with, but not always. And we'd rather stop it before it starts. Just as a matter of interest, my office, the Hampden District Attorney's Office, is currently prosecuting 3 individuals for these kinds of scams. One individual was driving up from New York State and was taking thousands of dollars of cash from an individual in Long Meadow. Another individual was more local, and another was from Texas. But we were able to, with our state police unit and local authorities, put cases together that resulted in prosecutions. Those cases are pending now in our court system. I believe 2 of the 3 individuals are held pre-trial. So we have a specialized unit, in fact. I started our elder abuse unit, and we have a specialized prosecutor and specialized advocates and
right?
folks who work on these kinds of cases. And
Wow.
it's the financial abuse against our senior citizen population, and it's also sometimes physical abuse, of course, which is also very tragic, where they're abused either by
Right.
caretakers or family members. So my office is really committed to protecting our senior citizen population and making this clear as well. Those who seek to harm or take advantage of our senior citizens, we're gonna do our darndest to make sure they're held to account.
I'm curious, what percentage of your plate of work is focused just on senior scams and senior issues?
My plate of work is full.
Yeah,
If you pay attention to the news and the newspapers, we've got a very, very busy county. Our caseloads
Right.
rival Boston's, rival Worcester's. We're one of the
Right.
busiest districts in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I've got about 86 assistant district attorneys who are doing all manner of things. A number of them are here in
Wow.
Westfield District Court. So we're handling violent crimes. We're handling crimes against children. We're handling, thefts and all different kinds of
Right.
things. So, a somewhat substantial amount of our time and my time is devoted to protecting our elderly population. And, we developed that unit that involves a few people, 1 assistant district attorney.
That's interesting. I didn't know that existed. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's important to us.
Right.
And we saw this proliferation of the scams in the last 5 or 6 years. And, really for the reasons, many of which I just mentioned at least, we said, how can we really tackle this problem? And we've done a lot of engagement with senior centers across the county. We've engaged with the Credit Union Association about how banks can be involved in noticing certain trends when a senior citizen might be withdrawing cash amounts of money, where a bank is now aware of those situations and can say,
That's
Mr.
interesting.
Smith or
Right.
Ms. Jones, what's happening here? So we're looking for ways where, again, we can prevent or stop these kinds of abuses from happening before they happen.
So I'm curious, and you may not be able to answer this, but of all the stuff that goes on, and to your point, it's so easy for them once they gain access to get the money and then they disappear. What do you feel your success rate or even the arrest rate is percentage-wise in comparison to the amount of illegal activity that's going on out there to what you're even made aware of and what you can follow up on?
Yeah, I've got to admit here, I'm going to be honest with you, Harry. It's probably a small percentage.
Yeah, I would think so. 'Cause
Yeah, and it's for a couple of reasons. I mean, one is reporting. We have
and I think that's a big part of it.
It absolutely is, and all the folks here listening, again, please report for your own, for your own safety. And for any justice that might result from what happened to you, and for the protection of other senior citizens around you. Make people aware of what's happening and how someone tried to or was successful in scamming you. The other piece, the piece is reporting, and the statistic we have is it's like 1 in 5 senior citizens report what happens to them. And again, that's due to embarrassment, potentially. It's due to all different things, not feeling like anybody's going to listen or police officers are accessible. I can promise you the Westfield Police Department and the city of Westfield is committed to protecting its senior citizens. The other piece is what I mentioned, the evidence issues. It's very difficult because very often these phone call scams and email scams are emanating from outside the country, if not outside, at least of the state. And that makes it very difficult for law enforcement to track down. And again, their sophistication makes it difficult. They sort of cover their tracks. So it's a challenge for law enforcement. Again, that's why the emphasis is on prevention.
Do you have a sense, is there a preferred method of scamming people that you see more often than not, or is it just all over the board?
It kind of ebbs and flows, and it kind of runs in trends in a sense. I mean, right now it's tax season. We're getting late in tax season, but the last couple months there was an IRS scam going around where folks were getting calls with someone claiming to be from the IRS, saying that your taxes are delinquent, et cetera, et cetera. And that can result in a request for money to be sent. I can tell you one thing right now, and this is something that we see. If someone's requesting payment in the form of gift cards, hang up the phone immediately. I mean, that is illegitimate, for the Social Security Administration or the IRS or some other government agency to say, pay me in gift cards. I want, 50 Amazon gift cards. That is illegitimate. Hang up the phone immediately. So, to your point, the IRS scam comes around about this time of year. The Social Security scam is kind of always a popular one because our senior citizens are so near and dear. That Social Security benefit is so important to them that we see that. One of the cases that we prosecuted was around Amazon, where someone said that your Amazon account is delinquent and that you need to provide money or you're going to have to pay very significant fines and fees.
I've had that one.
That's not going to happen. If you get a call from Amazon, that's Amazon doesn't do that. So we implore our senior citizens, and I don't mean to sound crass, but use your common sense. I mean, step back. That's, again, don't act alone, don't act in haste. Step back from a situation and say, does this make sense? Is an organization going to call me and ask me to wire money or to put thousands of dollars in an envelope in my mailbox? These are things that senior citizens, we know, and all people, if they employ their common sense, are not going to fall for. That's kind of one of those fundamental things we ask our senior citizens in particular to do. And again, that's consistent with that don't act alone, don't act in haste. Use your common sense.
So given the level of sophistication and, you've done an excellent job really outlining the reasons that people get sucked into these things and how scammers know how to play on emotions or fear of that type of thing. How do you go about differentiating the wrong from the right? How do you determine that, well, this one is legit and I should pay attention to it, or it's not legit and I don't want anything to do with it?
Verify. I was at the Wilbraham Senior Center last week talking with a lovely group of folks, and one thing came up is I get these things in the mail, and it purports to be from the Red Cross or whatever it might be. My response is verify that, right? You don't have to reply to the email that you get. You don't have to reply by way of the mail from something you get. Verify that. Many of our senior citizens are using the internet or, of course, have access to a phone. Make calls. Again, you don't know who's calling you. You don't know who necessarily is emailing you, but you know who you email and you know who you call. Verify that by sort of turning the tables and making the call or sending the email or going to the website. Another good example. I get these emails. I think a lot of people get these emails that say your password needs to be reset, your Amazon password or your bank password.
I get it all the time.
And I never click the link in that email.
Right.
If, in fact, I have to change my Amazon password or my eBay password or whatever it might be, I'm going to go on my computer or my phone to the website that I know is legitimate, right? I'm going to Google or type in the address bar, Amazon.com, or go to the app on my phone, which I know is legitimate, and then I'll change my password by those means. I'm not going to follow the link that I get via email, which may or may not be legitimate, right? I'm going to go to the source. That, again, is another takeaway. Go to the source and verify before you change a password, provide personal information, or provide some sort of payment.
That is a great point. because I do see this. And my wife, I have to follow with her. She's really good, boy. People, we get these things on the phone all the time. She listens. She'll just hang up on them or take me off that list. Boom. Nobody's going to get past Ann. She's really tough. I said,
great.
my God, I've got her.
Love her.
But, the email thing I do have to talk to her about because she tends to click on stuff. And to your point, I've seen those things come in, and I've always been suspicious. I just delete them because I figure that there's some way that they're gaining access to me. Once I click in, they're now getting access to me
Absolutely.
through whatever sophisticated means they have. So to your point, don't do that. Go to the website of the company or the organization itself.
Precisely.
That's a great point.
And you bring up a great point in how your wife handles these situations. I think it's a great example. And, I say this often to our senior citizen groups with whom we speak. Our senior citizens in particular are of a different generation, are kind and gentle souls, right? They don't want to be rude.
Yeah, right.
So if someone calls or someone comes to the door, given what I was talking about earlier, they don't want to hang up or they don't want to cut someone off.
Right.
I say to them, be rude, because these people in many cases are trying to scam you. Hang up the darn phone. Say, what you have to say. Don't engage, because sometimes that engagement, even over the phone, results in some information being provided to a scammer that's ultimately gonna hurt you. So, we all have this inclination to be polite to folks, right? Even somebody who calls and you think, oh, this poor person's making, $10 an hour at a call center. This person's probably a scammer. Just hang up the darn phone. Don't even converse with that individual, because that's how the process starts. And sometimes even very basic things can be problematic. Hang up the darn phone. I
know he'll call you and, hi Harry, how are you? How's what, do you know me? I don't think so.
And that's another good point, Harry. Just before you go any further, I mentioned this, but I want to kind of hammer it home because I think it's a very important point. A lot of these scammers will have aspects of your personal information. I mean, I can look up Anthony Gulluni on the internet and find out my address, find out your sort of universe of family.
Point. Right.
This stuff, believe it or not, is easily and quickly accessible on the internet. Family members, ages, who grandkids are, and that's again what I talked about with that grandparent scheme. They may say, "Hey, your grandson Tommy," and they may have some inkling of who Tommy is and what age he is and what school he goes to. This information is accessible, so don't get lured in to think, okay, this isn't a scam because they know something about my life or they know something about my family. That information is out there, especially for some of these more sophisticated scammers. Continue to be cynical and hang up the phone and just start with the presumption that something is not quite right.
I love that word cynical, and I think you absolutely have to be cynical. And to your point, I think people should do that. Just go online, Google your name. I think you'll be surprised at what pops up. The other place, to your point, I didn't think about it till you just mentioned it, is Facebook. Because if you pull up a person's name and you go into the About piece, and you go in there, all of a sudden, depending on what you've entered, there's all the family member names and where you live and where you've worked and all your birth date, all your information.
Very often we're volunteering this information to the internet, right?
Absolutely. It's right there.
Yeah, with social media being what it is, it has its benefits and it has its ills.
Right.
So absolutely, a lot of this information we're putting out there ourselves, but it's out there.
A funny story to your point about being cynical with my mom is she got on in age. She was always very trusting and loving and, she could meet you the first day and you're going to be her best friend for life. That's the kind of, she's going to give you the big hug and give her a chocolate.
Just like you, Harry. I feel like I've known you for 20 years. I just met you today. Yeah.
So I used to have to practice with her, especially when she got later into her 80s and especially in her early 90s and stuff. Okay, Mom, we're going to practice. Oh, but I can't just hang up on them. So I would call her on my cell phone. All right, I am calling you for now. Just hang up on me. I would practice.
Nice. Great.
But she would enter in a conversation, and they would become her best friend on the phone, or somebody would come up to the door. they're her best friend. I'm like, Ma, you can't be doing this.
Absolutely.
But again, just so trusting. And again, from that generation that she came up from, that's who you were and where you are. I think our generation today is a bit more cynical and a bit more careful, but you really do have to be cognizant of that. I went online last night and I got onto a website. I just Googled ways that seniors get scammed, and all of a sudden all these little pages popped up. But it was interesting. There was one page that listed all the ways that people can. Many of these you've already reiterated, but healthcare, Medicare obviously is a huge one. Counterfeit prescription drugs, because seniors obviously are huge drug users, depending on their health issues. Funeral and cemetery scams, and prepaying or those type. You must run into that. Anti-aging products, which I hadn't really thought about, but who of us doesn't want to look a lot? I was commenting to you before we got on the air that when I was your age, I looked like you with a full head of hair. It's tough for me to accept the fact that I have much less hair and it's all white. Yeah, I know it. The fake telemarketing calls that you just mentioned with deals on the phone. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. Right. Finding large sums of money and providing your bank account. We see these all the time. Oh, I'm from India and I just inherited $1 billion, and if you, I'll give you a 10% finder's fee if you send me your bank account. You must see these all the time. Seniors being asked to send money for emergency hospital bills, or people in the hospital, you just mentioned that. Fake charities being asked for donations, that's a huge one. And then these email phishing scams asking for your mortgage information, fake grandchildren needing financial help, the sweepstakes, lottery scams. There are so many of them. One of the ones that we are being inundated, just at our home, with, it's coming out of your world of work, but the Policeman Benevolent Association, they are automated calls. It's not even a real person. I don't know if they're for real or not. My wife will always get those, boom. Are you a real person? And there's always this delay before the computer can start, okay, that's it, you're done. Yeah. She hangs up on them. But the automated calls sound so real.
They do. As we get aware of the different kinds of scams and we try to prevent them, they sort of morph into different things. And that sophistication, again, to use that word, exists among this criminal community. My advice with something like that, our elderly population appreciates their police, right, and as they should. So all these organizations have websites. All these organizations, have phone numbers you can call back. Again, it gets back to that principle, Harry. You don't know who's calling you, but you know who you're calling, and you know to which website you're going, etc. Be affirmative. Don't be passive in how these things happen to you. If you want to give to a charity, verify it. Go to their website. Make the phone call that you know is legitimate. That number is legitimate. It takes a little extra work, and sometimes it. If you're struck with a charitable spirit, you want to act on it, but step back from that and make sure that your money is hard earned. Again, right? Our senior citizens have earned that money over many decades. Make sure the money that you want to give to a certain organization for a charity goes actually to that charity, to that organization. The worst thing, I think, for someone who has that spirit and wants to give of themselves and their money, it goes to the wrong place and somebody who's not legitimate. Right. That's awful. That's a tragedy, right?
Absolutely. Are there any other thoughts that you have? Any other areas of focus that we should chat about that you can think of? Or
well, I mean, when I think about what people are seeking, right, what criminals are seeking, it kind of comes down to your finances. It comes down to money. But there's a couple ways they can do that, and we've seen these crimes. We're prosecuting some of them. It happens, believe it or not. And again, sensitizing our senior population to these scams and that they happen is important. But people are asking for money. And we've had cases where $60,000, $80,000 in cash has been withdrawn and given to criminals, given to illegitimate people under ruses of different kinds. So they want, sometimes it's just cash. Sometimes it's that request to wire money. Sometimes it's that request for gift cards. And sometimes it is the personal information that can result in real problems for your identity, for your bank accounts, All these things we need to guard, and of course our physical safety. And that's what I talked about when someone's coming to the home. Don't engage, never act alone, never act in haste. Everyone, I hope and pray, has someone they can go to, right? They can call. It's a child, it's a grandchild, it's a friend, it's a sister, a brother. It's the Westfield Police Department if you're here in town. Make the phone call, double check before you do something, and don't let yourself get roped into that emotional journey that results in sometimes a very significant tragic mistake.
Yeah. Well, District Attorney Anthony Gulluni, thank you so much for coming in today. Really, really appreciate this message and talk about an important topic that we need to make our seniors aware of. But you've offered an awful lot of great tips in just how to make them safe and how to protect themselves and what to be looking out for. And I think that as we wrap up here, I would really encourage our senior citizens of Westfield and the greater Westfield area who are watching this to be vigilant, to be questioning about who's calling and about who's asking questions and what kind of questions they're asking and how they're trying to get at your money. If there's anything I've learned today, don't act alone. Don't act in haste. Verify, verify, verify. If you don't know, make a call to the company that they claim they're from to make sure that they are who they are. Don't just give them access to your home. Don't let them in. On the phone, don't get drawn in. Don't be afraid just to be rude and just hang up. If you suspect it's not right, don't feel you've got to get in a full conversation and then have a proper goodbye. Just hang up if you don't feel comfortable with it. But the big thing is just make sure that whoever you're dealing with is legitimate. And then finally, don't be embarrassed. Report it. So call your local police department, the non-emergency number. Let them know, even if they can't do anything about it, they need to be aware that there's a trend going on, that there are people out there looking, either calling, emails, whatever it is. Just make somebody aware of it so that they can get help. And if you really aren't sure about what to do, in our case, call Tina Gorman, Executive Director of the Westfield Senior Center, and get her advice. She has people on staff. They deal with this type of thing all the time, and they can certainly be of help. So again, Hampden District Attorney Anthony Gulluni, once again, thank you so much for coming in. We greatly appreciate it. I feel safer already knowing the work that you're doing.
I'm glad.
I didn't realize that you've got a unit, is that the proper word, that's dedicated just to looking at these types of issues.
Working preventatively and protecting our senior citizens when bad things happen.
Fantastic.
It's a work that is near and dear to all our hearts in the Hampden District Attorney's Office. I thank you, Harry, for allowing this forum to educate our senior citizens. Thank Tina Gorman for all the work she does at the Senior Center here in Westfield, and it was a delight to speak with you.
Yeah, that's terrific. So I want to say special thanks to P. Coles, our WCPC Westfield Cable Channel 15 producer and chief engineer, for his help and support to make this show possible. And on behalf of P. Coles and Tina Gorman, I'm Harry Rock. Have a great day, everyone. This has been another edition of the Westfield Council on Aging Presents. Thanks.